Hey guys, tonight we're trading your heated mattress pad and secret midnight cheese for something much, much grittier. The daily, heroic, and frequently disastrous life of a Roman peasant woman. Yes, tonight, it's not Julius Caesar, not Cleopatra, not even Russell Crowe in a skirt. It's you, in a mud brick hovel, asking the universe, why is everything itchy? And did I really just lose another sandal in a cow puddle? So before you wedge yourself into your softest pajamas and tuck in with an actual, non-poisonous glass of water, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what century you'd least want to live in. My money's on the one where your entire skincare routine is olive oil and silent prayers. Alright, dim those lights, put a fan on for that distant Roman breeze. Maybe grab a blanket, just not one infested with lice, straw, and possibly a confused chicken. Let's pause for a second. Could you make it through a single day where your to-do list reads, wake up, not get trampled, make bread, survive childbirth, and try not to get blamed for a bad harvest? Would you master the ancient art of doing laundry with a rock, or would you fake your own death at the first whiff of public latrines? Could you cook porridge for 12 with no spoons and exactly one questionable onion? Would you last 10 minutes at a Roman well, or would the neighborhood gossip defeat you before breakfast? Can you handle the glory of wool weaving, or would you just get tangled and give up? Congratulations. You've just woken up as a Roman peasant woman. The year is 126 BC. Your mattress is straw, your neighbors are nosy, your sandals are missing, and your schedule is somehow more punishing than a modern inbox. Good luck. You crack open one sleep-crusted eye and immediately regret it. The smoky, slightly goat-flavored air of your single-room home fills your lungs. There's no alarm clock, just a rooster with anger issues, an icy breeze through a cracked wall, and the gentle reminder of straw poking places straw shouldn't poke. This is not a soft start. It's more of a full-contact wake-up call, ancient Rome style. You try to stretch, but quickly realize that your sleeping space is less bedroom and more strategic human storage. You've got one arm wedged between your youngest child and the family's emergency carrot stash. Someone's toe, possibly yours, possibly not, is poking out from beneath the communal blanket. You consider going back to sleep, but the odds of waking up with a chicken perched on your forehead are just a little too high. There's a rhythm to Roman peasant mornings, and that rhythm is mostly coughing, shivering, and untangling yourself from livestock. If you're lucky, your only pillow is still in the vicinity of your head. If you're unlucky, it's migrated under the dog, who now looks at you with the smug satisfaction of someone who has truly mastered the art of sleeping through chaos. Your joints are stiff from the night chill, your back aches from the world's lumpiest straw mattress, and your sinuses are clogged with an unholy mix of wood, smoke, dust, and what can only be described as goat ambience. No one springs out of bed in a Roman hovel. You ooze out, grimacing, one body part at a time. Your first step lands in something cold and mysterious. Was it water? Spilled soup? The optimistic remains of last night's attempt at soup? You'll never know, because there's no time for CSI, ancient Rome. Your priority is just to stand upright before your children start demanding breakfast. And your neighbor's donkey pokes its head through a hole in the wall, looking for a snack. You stagger toward the doorway, if you can call it that. It's less a door and more a curtain, possibly an old tunic with ideas above its station. You take a deep breath, and instantly regret that too. The morning air is sharp, biting, and filled with the aroma of whatever the wind has dragged in from the communal latrine down the path. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they had, your family would probably eat them by mistake. Now comes the roll call. You count. Spouse. 3 children, 1 dog, 2 chickens, accounted for somehow, and the ever-present cloud of midges. Everyone seems to have survived the night. Except, perhaps, your dignity. You try to smooth your hair, but it's less style and more ancient Roman tumbleweed. Somewhere in the tangle, a flea is plotting its next move. Breakfast chatter begins immediately. The kids are already arguing about who gets the least burnt crust of bread. Your spouse asks, again, if you remembered to bank the fire last night. You didn't, but you're not about to admit it before you've had a sip of slightly suspicious well water. The fire, now mostly sullen embers and ash, refuses to cooperate with your morning ambitions. You poke at it with a stick, willing it back to life, while also wishing you could do the same for yourself. Outside, the world is waking up with you, badly. Roosters screech, neighbors bicker, and someone is already loudly complaining about last night's weather. The village is alive with the sound of misery and barely suppressed sarcasm. And as the sun finally hauls itself over the horizon, the interior of your hovel lights up enough to reveal just how much cleaning you did not get to yesterday. Spoiler, none. Somewhere, you remember reading about those luxury villas in Rome with their underfloor heating, marble statues, and separate rooms for sleeping, eating, and maybe even just being quietly left alone. Out here, in the mud-brick wilds of peasant life, you're lucky if your single room isn't also being colonized by an opportunistic sheep. You try to remind yourself that, historically, this is considered normal. But in the moment, it just feels like you're losing a wrestling match with your own furniture. Eventually, you find your sandals, one under a straw mat, the other in what can only be described as the wrong place at the wrong time. You resign yourself to another day of endless chores, indignant animals, and children who seem genetically incapable of speaking at a reasonable volume before dawn. But here's the thing. Somehow, you're still standing. Despite the cold, the noise, and the ever-present mystery puddles, you've survived another Roman night. You take a moment, just one small, smoky, chicken-adjacent moment, to congratulate yourself. In the ancient world, that's practically a luxury spa day. Now, go wake up the fire, scrape the worst of the straw out of your tunic, and try not to trip over the family dog. The Roman Empire isn't going to run itself, and you're already late for another round of guess what that smell is. Welcome to morning in a Roman hovel. Only 17 hours until bedtime. Personal space is a concept for emperors. You share your bed, your blanket, and, unfortunately, your pillow with at least 3 children, 1 spouse, and an alarming number of fleas. Your toddler's already stolen your only clean tunic, and there's a goat trying to eat your hair. Cozy? Maybe. Restful? Not even close. This is the Roman countryside's answer to a king-sized bed. A lumpy communal heap of humanity, stacked horizontally across a mat of straw, smelling faintly, and sometimes not so faintly, of old milk and foot. You'd like to imagine that, somewhere, a rich patrician is enjoying a private sleeping chamber, fresh linen, and a gentle harp melody. But down here, you're locked in an all-night wrestling match with your own family, and losing badly. Forget memory foam. Here, your mattress is a shifting ecosystem of straw, wool scraps, and mystery debris tracked in from a dozen muddy feet and the odd hoof. You burrow into the pile, seeking a sweet spot where your back doesn't protest and the straw hasn't been recently moistened by a small, sleepwalking child. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get the coveted spot away from the drafty wall, but only until someone else rolls over, and suddenly you're the one spooning the family dog, who smells like he's lost another battle with the neighbor's pig. At first light, the family pile erupts in a tangle of arms and elbows. There's no graceful getting up. It's more like unpeeling yourself from a living lasagna. Someone kicks you in the shin. Someone else, probably your eldest, sits on your leg to reach for a crust of bread hidden under the bedding. If you ever wondered where those missing crusts go, congratulations, they're all here, forming the geological layers beneath your so-called pillow. Meanwhile, the goat, sensing movement, takes this as her cue to start bleating directly into your face. This is her subtle reminder that breakfast, according to her, should always be served before sunrise, and by breakfast she means whatever you were planning to eat. Your toddler, undeterred by goat antics or parental exhaustion, has now fashioned your only decent tunic into a superhero cape and is using your back as a launch pad for their next adventure. Did I mention the smells? Every member of the household brings something to the olfactory party. Children offer the pungent perfume of dirt, sweat, and whatever they found in the road yesterday. Your spouse has mastered the aroma of honest labor, which is to say, sweat, onions, and a little despair. The family dog brings essence of mud puddle. The goat, well, she's in a category all her own. And then there's you, with your fragrant blend of wood smoke, fried porridge, and a faint tang of panic. You'd think you'd get used to it, but every new season brings a fresh medley of notes. In winter, it's all wet wool and damp hay. In summer, add a layer of sun-baked livestock and feet that haven't known shoes since March. Nose blindness isn't just a skill, it's a survival tactic. Sometimes you wonder if the only real luxury in ancient Rome is being able to breathe through your mouth. Despite all this, there's a certain rhythm to the pile, a choreography of shifting bodies, sleepy grumbles, and half-hearted shushing. Someone always ends up sideways, someone always falls off. If you're lucky, everyone gets a corner of the blanket and avoids the terrifying moment when a flea decides to relocate from a child to your neck. Privacy? Not a chance. Any secret you thought you had is public knowledge by sunrise. Whispered arguments are never whispered. If you think you can quietly hide a sweet treat in the bedding, think again. By morning, there will be a full inquisition, complete with toddler witnesses and a goat demanding compensation. Sometimes, if the night is cold enough and the wind is howling, you find a strange comfort in the chaos. You're not alone, not ever. The family pile is survival, warmth, and the ancient Roman version of a weighted blanket. Maybe you're covered in straw, feet, and goat fur, but you're also wrapped in the noises, smells, and low-level bickering that means you're home. So when you finally roll out of bed, bleary-eyed, hair pointing in 4 directions, tunic already pre-stained by the toddler, you sigh, stretch, and try to ignore the goat chewing your sleeve. The Roman family pile. Not restful, not quiet, but the only place in the empire where you truly belong. And if you're still finding fleas at lunchtime, well, that's just extra company for the midday nap. Nature calls, but indoor plumbing does not. You shuffle outside in sandals, or barefoot depending on how lucky you feel, heading for a pit latrine that's seen better centuries. Privacy is non-existent. Smell is overwhelming. And the only thing between you and catastrophe is a bit of luck and your questionable sense of balance. Let's start with the commute. It's not a luxurious walk down a carpeted hallway. This is more of an obstacle course. You're dodging rocks, discarded olive pits, possibly last night's laundry, and a chicken with the unmistakable look of someone who has recently acquired a vendetta. Every step is a gamble. Will you step on a sharp stone, something squishy, or a suspiciously warm patch of mud? No one knows. You certainly don't. When you finally reach the latrine, you're greeted by the full sensory package. The air is heavy, somewhere between ancient cheese and why is it spicy? A pit latrine in Roman times is essentially a deep hole with wooden planks or, if you're lucky, a slab of stone with a series of vaguely seat-shaped holes. If you're really lucky, one of the holes is still mostly round. If not, just try to hover and think happy thoughts. There's no such thing as me time in the Roman bathroom. The neighbours are 3 feet away, chatting about the weather or loudly judging your choice of sandals. Maybe there's a queue. Maybe someone's already in there, humming tunelessly and taking their sweet time because it's the only spot in the village with a little bit of breeze. Either way, you put on your best I'm not here face and pretend that sitting on a communal pit in full view of half your neighbours is the height of sophistication. And then there's the challenge of not falling in. Remember, this is a structure built with whatever was lying around, and it's seen more seasons than your mother-in-law. The wood is damp and just a little too bendy. The stone is cracked. The edges are alarmingly slippery. You balance, squat, and cling to whatever dignity you can muster, hoping that today is not the day your name gets added to the village's long, unofficial list of bathroom disasters. Now comes the fun part: cleaning up. Toilet paper? Not invented yet. You look around for the ancient world's answer to Charmin, a communal sponge on a stick, soaking in a bucket of vinegar water. That's right, one sponge, many users, lots of hope. You pretend it's fine, because the only other option is a handful of leaves or, in times of true desperation, the hem of your already tragic tunic. If you're in a pinch, maybe you just hope for a windy day and call it good enough. Of course, all this is happening while a goat peers around the corner, a toddler shouts your name, and the neighbour's wife starts a conversation about last year's olive harvest. There's no pretending you're having a private moment. The entire community knows exactly when you visit the latrine, how long you take, and if you look a little too relieved on your way back. Privacy isn't just a luxury, it's an urban legend. And then there's the ongoing threat of disaster. One false move, and you're fishing your sandal out of the pit, or worse, explaining to the village why you needed to borrow a rope at sunrise. Slipping in is the sort of incident that gets retold for generations, usually at your expense, and always louder every time. Remember when Claudia fell in the pit? She didn't look the same for weeks. You laugh it off, but secretly you triple-check your footing every time. On rare occasions, the local bathhouse is open, and you dream of actually washing your hands with soap. But most days, you wipe your palms on a nearby shrub and hope that a healthy immune system is hereditary. At last, you shuffle back to your hovel, sandals slightly damper, pride slightly dented, and already bracing for the next call of nature. It's humbling, communal, and just a little bit hazardous, basically a metaphor for Roman peasant life itself. You look at the sky, take a deep, not too deep breath, and remind yourself, at least you're not the one who just lost a sandal in the pit. Not today. Congratulations, you have survived another great Roman bathroom adventure. You can add that to your list of small victories, right between woke up with all your toes and managed not to fight the chicken before breakfast. In ancient Rome, that's called winning. Fetching water in ancient Rome is less peaceful morning stroll, more full-contact sport. You drag your clay jug to the village well, elbow through gossipy neighbours, and try not to drop your ration in the dirt. Bonus points if you come home without a sprained ankle or a new rumour started about your cousin. Let's be honest, the day you skip the water run is the day the family dog decides to roll in something unspeakable, and everyone else suddenly needs to wash their hands, translation, splash water on themselves and most of the floor. So you shoulder your battered amphora, which used to be a wedding gift and is now more patchwork than pottery, and step outside into the early chaos. The village well is where everyone meets, which means it's also where everyone argues. You can always spot a newcomer. They walk hopefully toward the well, thinking it'll be like one of those charming mosaics in the city, women in spotless togas smiling under the sun. 5 minutes later, they're in a scrum with Aunt Junior, 3 sheep, and a 9-year-old who's learned the fine art of queue jumping from his grandmother. There's a definite pecking order here, and spoiler, you are not at the top. The elderly get first dibs, as do the loudest and most persistent complainers. Then come the mothers of small children, the regulars, and, last but not least, whoever forgot yesterday and is now desperately bartering bread for a place in line. You try to look casual, like you're just there for the conversation, but the real goal is getting water before the sun reaches its full, let's turn your only dress into a sweat rag intensity. As you edge closer, the local gossip mill is already in high gear. Who was out late last night? Who left the communal oven a mess? And, of course, what on earth was that smell coming from behind Marcus's house? Every comment is a potential grenade, and one poorly timed smirk can result in your mother-in-law hearing that you were seen with a suspiciously handsome stranger, who was, in fact, just the travelling carrot vendor. Finally, it's your turn at the well. You brace yourself and try to look like you know what you're doing a lie. You drop the bucket at least once a week. The rope is frayed, the pulley creaks ominously, and the well water always tastes faintly of iron and nostalgia for a time when you didn't have to haul it up by hand. You lower the bucket, hoping it doesn't tip sideways and spill the good water all over the walls. Spoiler, it usually does. The worst part is lifting a full bucket. Ancient Roman engineering, marvelous aqueducts for the city, do it yourself for the peasants. The amphora weighs roughly as much as a chubby goat by the time it's full, and your arms start to shake on the third step back. If you drop it, not only do you have to get back in line, but you've also provided the morning's entertainment. Last month, you tripped over your own sandal and launched a day's water supply directly into a neighbour's clean laundry. People are still talking about it. Back at the hovel, everyone is suddenly very interested in helping unload, which is code for taking the first drink and then wandering away. The youngest child claims they're dying of thirst. The dog is already sniffing the jug. Your spouse appears, pretending to be surprised you're back so soon, while not so subtly eyeing the cleanest cup. If you're lucky, no one has followed you home to keep the gossip going. If you're unlucky, you've been assigned to mediate a dispute between two neighbours over whose goat ate whose turnips, all because you happened to be at the well at the wrong time. But at least, for a fleeting moment, you feel like the undisputed champion of the domestic world. You've conquered the well, survived the rumours, and delivered enough water for breakfast, laundry, and, if the gods are kind, a quick splash over your own face. You pour the first cup, close your eyes, and savour the taste. Slightly gritty, oddly metallic, and cold enough to remind you that, even in ancient Rome, life's victories are small and hard won. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. But for now, the jug is full, the gossips are behind you, and your ankles are miraculously untwisted. Not bad for a daily water run. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a reheated mash of barley, beans, and something that might have been a vegetable in a past life. There's no toast. There's barely taste, but you wolf it down, dodging the family chicken who believes all food belongs to her now. Morning meals in the Roman countryside are less start your day right and more try to survive until lunch. Your bowl, if you're lucky enough to have one that's not chipped, is filled with whatever was left in the pot from yesterday. Roman peasant cuisine is basically one long experiment in stretching ingredients, reinventing leftovers, and finding new ways to pretend that acorn mush is just a regional delicacy. There's no such thing as a full English breakfast. There isn't even a partial Roman breakfast. Your options are thick barley porridge, chunky enough to stand a spoon in, a few stray beans, or the occasional wild green your eldest picked on the walk home yesterday, now wilted and suspiciously slimy. If you're feeling really wild, you might crumble in a little hard cheese, provided it isn't already claimed by the family mouse. Coffee, not in this universe. The closest you get to a morning pick-me-up is a cup of yesterday's wine, watered down so much it tastes like someone whispered grape over a puddle. Tea? Maybe an herbal infusion, but only if someone in the house remembered not to trample the mint plant during last week's game of chase the goat. Most days, it's cold water from the well, with a hint of iron and nostalgia. The best part about breakfast is the company, assuming you define best as chaotic and loud. Everyone crowds around the hearth, spoons at the ready, while the air fills with a harmonious mix of complaints, yawns, and sibling squabbles. The baby is gnawing on a crust of bread so tough it could be used to fix the roof. Your oldest is poking at their porridge, hoping to find a bean that's not already half dissolved. Your spouse is already lamenting the lack of honey, as if you're secretly hoarding it in a luxury beehive under the floorboards. And then there's the chicken. She's faster than any child, sneakier than any neighbour, and apparently convinced she's entitled to first pick of whatever you're eating. She darts in, beak poised, aiming straight for the biggest, gooeyest blob of barley. You fend her off with a practiced sweep of the hand, but she's relentless. By the time you finish eating, you've burned at least as many calories defending your bowl as you've consumed. There's something uniquely Roman about staring into your breakfast, wondering if today's meal is more or less grey than yesterday's. Every spoonful is a gamble. Will you get a nice bit of bean, or is that just a lump of barley that never got soft? Sometimes you find a flavor surprise, an accidental fennel seed or a hint of smoke from last night's fire. Mostly, though, it's just food, functional, bland, and guaranteed to keep you alive. Not happy, just alive. If you're really living the high life, you might get a rare treat. An egg, still warm from the chicken, assuming she didn't hide it in the woodpile again. Or a thin slice of salty pork, left over from a feast 3 weeks ago. These are the breakfasts you talk about for days, maybe even years. Remember the time we had 2 eggs? Luxury. Pure luxury. Cleanup is simple and brutal. No running water, no sink, just a quick wipe of the bowl with a bit of stale bread or a handful of grass. If you're extra thrifty, you pass the bowl to the dog. He'll take care of anything the chicken didn't manage to steal. And just like that, breakfast is over. Everyone is still hungry, but at least the worst of the morning grumpiness has been stifled, if only for a few minutes. It's not satisfying, it's not exciting, but it gets you through to the next meal, which will probably look suspiciously like breakfast. So you sigh, scrape the last bit of barley off your tunic, and get ready for the real work of the day. The chicken gives you one last side eye and saunters away, already plotting her next snack heist. And you? You made it through another breakfast that fought back. In ancient Rome, that's as close to a win as it gets. Getting dressed is a test of both endurance and optimism. Your tunic is rough, your belt is frayed, and your best sandals are, technically, your only sandals. You layer on your oldest cloak and pray it doesn't rain. Wool shrinks, and so does your dignity. In the glamorous world of Roman peasant couture, you don't have a closet. You have a sad little pile of clothing that looks like it survived a stampede. There's no color coordination, no this season's must-have, just a rotating cast of tunics, cloaks, and the occasional mystery rag that you use for emergencies, cleaning, or, in a pinch, as a headscarf. Your entire wardrobe fits inside a single basket, unless you count the clothes currently being used by the goat as a bedding upgrade. Let's start with the tunic. It's made of coarse wool or linen, cut for generous comfort, which means it's 2 sizes too big in some places and uncomfortably tight in others. If you're lucky, it's only a little bit itchy. If you're unlucky, it's a personal relationship with every stinging nettle and bramble in the province. There's a rumor that rich Romans wear silk, soft, shimmering, and expensive enough to ransom a senator. You try not to think about it as you scratch a fresh rash developing under your arm. Fastening your tunic requires a belt. Or, more accurately, the remains of what once was a belt. Maybe it's a frayed strip of leather, or a piece of rope you liberated from a hay bale. Style tip: just tie it tight and hope no one notices it's technically last year's harness. The belt is there to keep your tunic out of the mud, cinch in your dinner of mostly barley, and provide a handy place to tuck a knife, a scrap of cheese, or a particularly stubborn comb. Now, the cloak. Wool, of course, because in the Roman countryside, warmth always beats elegance. This cloak has seen things. It's been a blanket, a rain shield, a picnic cloth, and once, during an unfortunate incident with a runaway donkey, an impromptu rope. There are holes, there are stains, and there's an ever-present whiff of last season's onion harvest. You wrap it around yourself and suddenly gain 20 pounds of rustic peasant charm. And let's not forget the sandals. Handmade, possibly by you, definitely not by anyone who ever studied footwear. The leather straps cut into your ankles, but going barefoot is a guaranteed way to collect every sharp stone and thorn in the province. On rainy days, sandals dissolve into mud magnets, and you shuffle around like someone losing a slow-motion race with their own dignity. Your feet develop the calluses of a medieval cart horse, but at least you're not barefoot in January most years. Layering is key, but with every layer comes another opportunity for chafing. In the winter, you pile on everything you own. 2 tunics, one marginally less dirty than the other, a cloak, maybe an extra scarf if you haven't traded it for bread. In summer, You remove as much as decency, and your neighbors allow, but you still end up sticky, itchy, and covered in a fine dusting of mystery pollen. Fashion accessories? Forget it. Jewelry is for the wealthy, and the only ring you're sporting is a bright red rash around your neck from a wool scarf that's seen too many washings in lye. Hairpins are improvised from chicken bones, twigs, or, on special occasions, the single wooden comb passed down through 3 generations and never, ever cleaned. Laundry day is less fresh linen, and more will this fall apart if I hit it against a rock. Washing your clothes means a trek to the river with a hunk of homemade soap, ash, and animal fat if you're fancy, and a prayer that nothing essential floats away. By the time you trudge home, everything is still damp, but at least it's a little less crunchy. Of course, everyone is in the same boat. Itchy, mismatched, and hoping their tunic doesn't split at the seams mid-market. You learn to embrace the look, hunched, rumpled, and accessorized with a thin film of livestock dust. Anyone who tries to shame you for your fashion choices is welcome to borrow your cloak on laundry day and discover why all the local goats run when they see you coming. So you cinch your belt, adjust your cloak, and head out the door, itchy, unbothered, and rocking the ancient peasant chic look that, let's face it, will never come back into style. At least, not until wool tunics stop itching and goats learn to respect personal property. Hygiene is a war you're definitely losing. Lice are your co-workers. Fleas are basically family. Baths happen when the stars align, meaning rarely. You scratch, you sigh. You try to ignore the biting and focus on more pressing matters, like not letting the goat back into your bed. If you've ever complained about a bad hair day, try living in a world where your hair is its own thriving ecosystem. The Roman countryside doesn't do shampoo, and conditioner is just wishful thinking. Your scalp is a social club for lice, tiny, relentless creatures with ambitions far grander than their size. Sometimes you catch your daughter absently picking at her own hair, and you realize she's not being pensive. She's hunting. The morning routine is less about brushing your teeth and more about mutual pest removal. You sit in the early light, picking lice from your child's hair while she returns the favor. It's oddly bonding in a way, kind of like monkeys at the zoo, but with less grace and more grumbling. If the neighbors see you, they just nod, scratch their own heads, and keep moving. Everyone's in the same itchy boat. Bathing is less a habit and more an aspiration. The Roman bathhouse is in town, miles away, and only available if you can spare the time, the coin, and the will to survive public nudity in front of every gossipy neighbor you know. At home, your bath is a basin of cold water that's seen too many feet and not enough soap. You scrub yourself with a rag that doubles as a dishcloth, and hope you remove at least some of the evidence before your spouse points out that you missed a spot. Soap itself is a rare luxury, made from ashes and leftover animal fat if you're lucky, and if you're not, you make do with sand, leaves, or the hope that vigorous rubbing will scare away the dirt. Your skin is in a constant state of negotiation with the universe, dry and cracked in winter, sticky and dust, caked in summer, and always, always itchy. The fleas are practically extended family at this point. They live in your straw mattress, your blankets, the seams of your tunic, and occasionally your hair. They come with you to market and back, and never once offer to help with chores. When you lie down at night, you can hear them plotting. Sometimes it's a quick bite on the ankle, other times a full-scale midnight assault. You become adept at the one-handed scratch, the quick smack, the deep sigh of resignation, and then there's dirt. You are never, ever clean. Even if you wash, by the time you finish getting dressed, you're dusty again. The Roman countryside is nothing if not enthusiastic about sharing its soil. Every gust of wind brings a fresh coating. Every walk to the well is an invitation for new stains. You've given up on white linen and simply call everything earth tone now. Your fingernails are a lost cause, permanently embedded with the story of your week, your work, and the last time you tried to dig up turnips. Of course, you try to keep the worst of it at bay. You shake out the bedding, sweep the floor, and hang your tunic in the sun whenever you remember. Sometimes you even catch a break and find a few minutes to dunk your feet in the stream. But the second you relax, a chicken runs through the house, trailing feathers, and everything starts all over again. It's not just you, your kids are dirt magnets. They roll, climb, dig, and generally wage their own personal wars with hygiene. Sometimes you catch your spouse with a guilty look, trying to pick at a flea under their collar. You pretend not to notice. There are some battles you fight alone, and some you simply surrender to. Still, you persevere. You scratch, you grumble, you adapt. You look forward to those rare days when a warm breeze and a splash of water make you feel, for 5 whole minutes, almost human. And then the dog jumps on you, muddy and flea-ridden, and you realize this is just how it is. The lice, the fleas, and the dirt, they're not just problems, they're part of the family. So you sigh, roll up your sleeves, and go back to work. You can't win the war against filth, but you can keep fighting. After all, the alternative is letting the goat sleep in your bed again. And nobody deserves that fate, not even a Roman peasant woman. It's laundry day, which means lugging your reeking clothes to the nearest stream or public laundry. Soap? Try ashes or fermented urine. Scrubbing tunics with rocks, you trade gossip and hope no one notices that your best toga is actually your husband's cast-off, now permanently stained and 2 sizes too big. The moment you declare it's time for laundry, half the family disappears. Suddenly, everyone has urgent business in the fields, even the goat. You're left wrestling an armload of wool, linen, and mysterious rags out the door, hoping none of the neighbors notice you dropping socks as you go. Laundry is never a solo endeavor, though. Oh no. The entire village heads to the stream on the same day, all determined to clean a year's worth of dirt off in one go. Arriving at the washing spot, you're greeted by a wall of sound, running water, cackling laughter, and the high-pitched shrieks of someone realizing their favorite tunic has just floated downstream. The scene is equal parts ancient assembly line and impromptu therapy session. It's here, elbow deep in icy water, that you learn who's been courting whom, whose pig got into the priest's herb garden, and why everyone's pretending not to notice the smell wafting from old Flavia's pile of socks. You set to work, bashing grime out of your tunics against smooth river rocks, splashing your face, and wishing for just a moment of warm water. No such luck. If you wanted warm, you'd have to boil it yourself, and who has the firewood for that? Soap is a luxury, so most folks rely on a hearty mixture of ashes, sand, and, when you can get it, stale urine. That's right. Ancient Romans discovered ammonia centuries before anyone thought to bottle it for fresh scent. If you're rich, you might pay a fullonica to professionally launder your garments in a big communal vat of fermenting pee. If you're not, you pray the wind is blowing in the right direction and try not to breathe too deeply. You scrub, you wring, you beat the living daylights out of each piece of clothing. Stains become personal enemies. Your hands go numb, your back starts to ache, and still you keep going, fueled by a strange combination of pride, competition, and the vague hope that next week's laundry pile will somehow be smaller. It never is. Laundry day is also parade day for your worst secrets. That hole in the armpit? Everyone sees it. The wine stain that never quite came out? A subject for communal discussion. And let's not even talk about the time your under tunic got stuck in a bramble and returned with more holes than fabric. The unwritten rule is, no one judges, as long as you don't judge back. Still, you can't help but blush as someone points out that your new cloak is just last winter's patchwork, with the colours faded into mud spectrum. All around you, the laundry crowd is in full gossip mode. Someone's cousin is getting married. Again, the miller's wife suspects her husband of watering down the flour. 2 neighbours nearly come to blows over the rightful owner of a surprisingly nice woolen sock. Meanwhile, you're just trying not to lose your grip on the soap rock and accidentally send your husband's only tunic downstream to be adopted by a lucky fisherman. By midday, the sun is out, and the riverbank is festooned with garments in every shade of once was white. You wring out the last stubborn tunic and lay it on a bush to dry, weighing it down with a convenient stone. Or, if you're unlucky, a curious goose. There's a communal sigh as everyone surveys their hard work and wonders if the wind will dry the laundry before the inevitable afternoon rain. Packing up, you give yourself a moment to appreciate the feeling of victory. A small one, sure, but a victory nonetheless. Your arms ache, your knees are wet, and your fingers look like prunes, but the laundry is clean-ish, the gossip is fresh, and your sense of communal suffering is renewed. As you trudge home, arms full of sun-bleached, only slightly stained clothing, you remind yourself you'll have to do this all again next week. Or, let's be honest, the next time you can no longer tell where the tunic ends and the smell begins. In ancient Rome, clean is a spectrum, and you, heroic peasant, are at the top of it, at least for the next hour or two. You are the breadwinner, literally. You knead dough with hands already cracked from fieldwork, hoping today's loaf is less rock, more food. Yeast is unpredictable, ovens are communal, and you're always one bad bake away from neighborhood ridicule. The Roman peasant day doesn't start with warm, crusty loaves or the gentle aroma of bakery air. No, your morning is more please. Let this not be the day my bread becomes a deadly weapon. Your dough is a stubborn, sticky beast. Barley flour if you're lucky, millet if you're not. Always full of mysterious flecks and the occasional weevil. No one wastes time picking them out. Extra protein is the official peasant motto. Mixing is a full-body experience. You scoop up water that may or may not taste faintly of iron, dump it into a rough wooden bowl, and start kneading like your life depends on it, because, in a very real way, it does. Your knuckles are permanently dusted with flour, and your forearms could win a wrestling contest against a Roman legionnaire. All the while, you're praying that this is the day the yeast does its job, instead of taking one look at your kitchen and deciding to go on strike. Yeast, in the Roman countryside, is like the gods. Fickle, invisible, and given to sudden fits of malice. Some days, your dough puffs up with pride and hope. Other days it sits there, as flat and lifeless as your enthusiasm for early mornings. The secret starter is a family heirloom, handed down and occasionally forgotten behind the hearth, only to be rediscovered when it smells weird enough to get attention. If you add too much, the bread turns sour and rises like a science experiment gone wrong. Too little, and you might as well serve baked mud. And then comes the shaping, where you do your best to create something that looks more appetizing than a doorstop. Sometimes you get fancy and braid it, just to remind yourself you're a civilized Roman and not a cave dweller. Most of the time, it's just a flat, round loaf, decorated with your fingerprints and a healthy dose of desperation. Baking day is a group effort, and not necessarily in a good way. The village's single oven is a communal affair, so you carry your precious dough down the path, past a gauntlet of gossips who are eager to see whether you're on form this week or about to repeat the disaster of last March. When your loaf exploded and took someone's sandals with it. The oven itself is always hot, sometimes too hot, sometimes not at all, and requires the kind of judgment that only comes from years of ruined crusts and accidental charcoal. The moment of truth is brutal and public. You slide your loaf onto the stone, say a prayer to any gods listening, and hope no one laughs if the top caves in. There's always a neighbour, arms crossed, ready to offer advice you didn't ask for. Looks a bit dry this week. I'd have used more salt. Is that a pebble? You pretend not to hear as you poke at the loaf and hope the bottom isn't fused to the oven floor. Once the bread is out, the true test begins. A good loaf is a small miracle. Edible, slightly soft, maybe even golden if the gods were smiling and the oven cooperated. A bad loaf is an insult that will follow you for weeks. Your family eats whatever you make, eventually, but your pride is on the line at every meal. And yet, bread is life. It's breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. It's how you bribe the children, make peace with the neighbors, and remind yourself that you're more than just a pair of tired hands and itchy clothes. You might grumble, you might pray, you might threaten the yeast, but you keep kneading. Every loaf is a victory over bad flour, wild yeast, and the communal oven's unpredictable temper. So you wipe your hands, breathe in the warm, dusty scent, and slice into another homemade masterpiece, hoping, as always, that this one doesn't break anyone's tooth. In ancient Rome, that's the taste of success. Heading to market is less shopping spree, more try not to get robbed. You barter for wilted greens, haggle over the price of onions, and trade gossip as currency. The best deal? Not being trampled by a runaway pig. The Roman marketplace is the ultimate test of both nerves and negotiation. Picture a grand plaza from the history books, but remove the marble, add a lot more mud, and pack it with everyone you've ever met and everyone you'd rather avoid. You arrive clutching your basket, full of high hopes and low expectations, knowing that today you'll need all your wits and at least 3 spare coins you're willing to lose. The market is alive before dawn, buzzing with shouts, animal calls, and the unmistakable sound of something ceramic smashing in the distance. The early birds, actual birds and metaphorical ones, are already circling the best produce, which isn't saying much. There's no Instagram-ready display here. You're picking over piles of turnips, limp cabbages, and a suspicious squash that's been changing colour for weeks. If you spot an apple without a bite already missing, consider yourself blessed by the gods. Trading is more art than science. Currency, sometimes. More often, it's barter. And you learn quickly that your freshly baked loaf doesn't impress the cheese vendor, who's still holding a grudge from last year's bread incident. You try to smile, offer a handful of walnuts and a story about your neighbour's terrible pie, but she's heard it before. It usually comes down to who needs what most: cheese for onions, wool for salt, and gossip for everything else. And oh, the gossip. You can buy a week's worth of rumours for the price of a bruised plum. Some are useful. Don't buy from the fishmonger, he's been watering down the wine again, while others are pure entertainment. Did you hear Lucia's goat finally learned to climb the roof? Listening carefully is essential. It might save you from overpaying, or worse, buying eggs that are only a little bit rotten. The sounds and smells are a full sensory assault. Someone is always bickering over price. Kids are shrieking over boiled sweets. And in the background, a donkey is braying like he's narrating your whole morning. The butchers are hacking away at cuts of meat that could double as shoes. The fishmonger's stall is a festival of questionable freshness, and the air is heavy with spices, sweat, and the kind of cheese that should probably be declared a controlled substance. It's a contact sport. There's the jostling for a good spot, the sly elbow from a neighbour trying to beat you to the last bunch of leeks, and the ever-present risk of stepping in something unspeakable. You keep one eye on your basket at all times, because a nimble child or bold chicken will not hesitate to snatch a crust of bread when you're distracted haggling over lentils. You remember the tale of the market pickpocket, a legend in the village, known for stealing a live eel right out of someone's apron. If you make it home with everything you arrived with, you're a champion. Pigs, of course, are the real masters of chaos. It's not a proper market day until a runaway pig careens through the crowd, scattering baskets, knocking over old ladies, and leaving a trail of mayhem in its wake. Experienced shoppers don't even blink. They just jump out of the way, scoop up any fallen carrots, and get back to business. By the time you've bartered for a few sad onions, a slightly mouldy hunk of cheese, and a new rumour about the baker's mysterious late-night deliveries, you're exhausted but victorious. Your feet are muddy, your purse is lighter, and your ears are ringing with a dozen arguments, half of which you accidentally started. At home, you sort through your haul, triumphant over every scrap and crumb. The market isn't about getting the best. It's about surviving the chaos, coming home with a story or two, and keeping your shoes intact. Tomorrow the rumours will be fresher than the bread, and you'll do it all again, battle-hardened, street-smart, and, hopefully, just a little bit quicker than the pigs. Preparing dinner means squatting over a smoky, temperamental fire that's determined to blind you. Everything tastes a bit like ash. and most recipes start with, first, remove the stones. If you manage to cook a stew without setting your hem on fire, you're a culinary genius. The Roman peasant kitchen is not a place for the faint-hearted. Your stove is a lopsided fire pit dug into the dirt, rimmed with ancient stones and wishful thinking. There are no cast-iron skillets, no gleaming copper pans, just a battered pot, a warped ladle, and a handful of wooden spoons that double as dog toys in their off hours. If you want to get fancy, you might prop a flat stone over the flames and call it your grill. But mostly, you're just hoping today's fuel doesn't explode with a suspicious hiss and send a shower of embers down your tunic. Starting the fire is a daily gamble. You pile up whatever dry twigs and dung you manage to scavenge, pray for a spark, and then coax, curse, and bribe the flames with a precious scrap of old cloth. If the wood is wet, spoiler, it's always wet, you get more smoke than heat, and by the time the fire's finally going, you smell like a smoked sausage with hygiene issues. You cough, wipe the tears from your eyes, and consider the Roman tradition of simply eating raw turnips for dinner. But you persevere, because tonight's meal, like every meal, is high stakes. The whole family is counting on your ability to transform what's left in the sack into something at least vaguely edible. You peer into your pantry. Some barley, a shriveled carrot, the last withered onion, a pinch of ancient herbs, and possibly a chunk of pork if you're celebrating a festival or won the bread lottery at market. If you're lucky, you find a dusty jar of lentils. If you're really lucky, there's no mouse in it. Every dish begins with the sacred ritual of removing debris. Stones, twigs, a beetle or two. These are just part of the authentic rustic experience. You toss everything into the pot, add water, and settle in for the long process of stirring and hoping. Some days, the pot bubbles cheerfully, filling the hovel with a smell that almost counts as appetizing. Other days, the fire chokes, the soup scalds to the bottom, and you're left scraping burnt bits into the dog's bowl. Timing is everything, and the fire doesn't care. Too hot, and the stew boils over, sending your precious barley grains into the coals. Too cool, and dinner takes so long you wonder if it's fermenting into next week's breakfast. There's no timer, just a gut feeling honed by years of disasters. You glance at the sun, sniff the air, listen to the complaints of hungry children, and hope you're not about to invent a new form of Roman charcoal. Meanwhile, you're fighting a running battle with the elements. Wind sneaks in and blows ash everywhere. Rain drips through the roof, sizzling on the fire and adding mystery water to the stew. Dogs circle, cats prowl, chickens try to jump into the pot. You wave them off with your ladle and threaten to make them the main ingredient if they don't back off. The children are no help. They're too busy fighting over who gets the first bowl, as if there's ever enough to go around. Eventually, through some mix of skill, luck, and divine intervention, dinner is done. You ladle out portions into chipped bowls, careful not to serve the blackened bits clinging to the bottom. Everyone gathers around, spoon in hand, ready to critique your efforts with all the brutal honesty only family can offer. If no one spits out a rock or pulls a feather from their stew, you consider it a win. You taste it yourself. It's food. It's hot, vaguely salty. And yes, there's a definite hint of ash. But everyone eats. The fire is still, mostly, contained, and your cloak is miraculously unsinged. So you sit back, rub the soot from your cheeks, and declare victory, at least until tomorrow. Because in the Roman countryside, cooking is less an art, more a daily battle with the elements, your ingredients, and a fire that seems to have a personal grudge against you. Meals are communal, chaotic, and suspiciously short on meat. You eat with your hands, pass the least burnt bread, and try to avoid the special pot that's just boiled turnip again. Wine is watered down, conversation is lively, and someone always drops something in the stew. Forget candlelit dinners and romantic table settings. Roman peasant meals are a team sport, and the only rule is survival. The table, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a lopsided plank on two barrels. More often, it's just a battered board laid across the only clean spot on the floor, with everyone gathered around in a circle, knees bumping, elbows flying, and the family dog lurking nearby for dropped scraps and moral support. Food is simple and honest, which is a nice way of saying cheap and repetitive. The star of every meal is bread, usually in the form of a dense, crusty loaf that could double as a tool for self-defense. You pass it around, each person breaking off a chunk with the same reverence you'd reserve for a lottery ticket in modern times. It's a victory if you get a piece that isn't just crust, or if you manage to avoid the corner that tastes faintly of last week's ash. The main dish rotates between stew, pottage, and whatever's left in the pot. The stew is mostly beans, lentils, cabbage, and the occasional turnip, with a whisper of meat if there's been a festival, a lucky hunting day, or a neighbour's chicken mysteriously vanished. Everyone knows exactly how many pieces of sausage are floating in the pot, and negotiations for the best bits are subtle, ruthless, and occasionally end in minor family feuds. You master the art of fishing through the pot with a wooden spoon, aiming for a chunk of carrot, and praying it's not just another onion pretending to be special. Eating is done with hands, because why dirty a spoon that's so rare it has a family name? Sometimes you have a shared wooden ladle, which everyone wipes on their tunic before passing it along. Hygiene is, at best, a work in progress. If the dog licks the bowl before you've finished, that's just one less dish to wash. Wine is served at every meal, but don't get too excited. It's been watered down so much it barely counts as a beverage. The real reason for drinking it isn't flavour but necessity. The water from the well is often more dangerous than a bad hangover. The wine is tart, gritty, and leaves you just buzzed enough to pretend the bread is soft. Conversations range from the day's gossip to complaints about the weather, and everyone speaks at once. Children argue over who got the biggest turnip. Adults swap stories about the neighbour's outrageous new goat, and somewhere in the background, someone is always plotting to steal the last onion. You learn to eat with one ear tuned to the latest scandal, just in case you need to correct a rumour before it grows legs and walks off into the next village. Spills are inevitable. Someone always knocks over a cup, drops bread in the stew, or sends half a bowl sliding across the floor to the family dog. No one blinks, just a quick scoop, a shrug, and dinner continues. Cleanliness is aspirational, efficiency is key. Every once in a while, a festival or feast day transforms dinner into something truly special. There's singing, a little extra wine, and, miracle of miracles, a slab of pork or a handful of dates for dessert. For one glorious evening, you forget about the aches, the cold, and the itchy wool, and simply enjoy the rare taste of abundance. But most nights, dinner is a boisterous, slightly chaotic ritual. The food is humble, the bread is hard, and everyone's still hungry, but the laughter is real. You scrape the bottom of the pot, chase the last crumbs with your finger, and settle in for a few more minutes of warmth and company before another long day. As the plates are cleared, as the bowls are licked clean and the crumbs are swept into a pile for the chickens, you lean back full enough and grateful for another meal survived. In a world where nothing is certain, sharing a meal is the best insurance policy you've got. And if all else fails, there's always breakfast, whatever's left, and whoever's quick enough to grab it. Your chore list is epic. Feed the livestock, mend the tunics, patch the roof, shoo the dog out of the beans, and keep the kids from joining the local street theatre. The Roman gods aren't watching you, but your mother-in-law definitely is. Chores in ancient Rome are less about getting things done, and more about fighting a slow war of attrition against dirt, chaos, and basic physics. You start the day with optimism. Today you'll finally fix that leak in the roof and maybe even untangle last week's laundry from the bramble bush. Within 5 minutes, you realize your plans were far too ambitious. You haven't even found your other sandal, and the goat is already eyeing your breakfast. Feeding the animals is first on the list. If you've ever wanted to feel like a celebrity, just step outside with a bucket of barley. Chickens swarm your ankles, the pig is squealing for attention, and the family dog acts as if he's never eaten before. The sheep, meanwhile, stare at you with the kind of judgment only a sheep can manage. If you forget the order, someone will let you know, usually by escaping. You discover new levels of agility chasing a chicken through the neighbor's garden at dawn. Then there's the laundry. Again, the pile is somehow larger than yesterday, as if your clothes multiply while you sleep. You scrub tunics with sand, slap them on stones, and hope they dry before the next rainstorm. It's a miracle anything holds together, given that the children treat every garment as an adventure obstacle course and the dog thinks socks are a food group. Next, mending. Every tunic, blanket and cloak in the house has at least one hole, stain, or suspicious tear. Needles are precious, and thread is always running out, so your sewing kit is a nest of tangled hope. You patch a tunic's elbow, only to watch a child rip the knee minutes later. You've stopped striving for good as new. Your new standard doesn't immediately fall apart. Once your fingers are sufficiently pricked, and your patience is frayed, it's time to address the house. The roof leaks. The floor is a living timeline of past spills, and there's always some mystery draft sneaking in. Patching the roof is its own brand of adventure, balancing on a rickety ladder, shoving straw between tiles, and praying you don't fall off and land in the pigsty again. The one time you tried to get help from your spouse, they vanished, claiming urgent business at the well. You suspect a conspiracy. And, as always, there's the garden. You weed, you water, you shoo away the neighbour's goat, who is, frankly, far too clever for her own good. Half the vegetables end up with tooth marks. The other half you guard like buried treasure. Any success you have is immediately undercut by the family chickens, who view every newly planted seed as a challenge. None of this happens in peace. The children are underfoot, sometimes literally. If you blink, they've organised a game of Roman street theatre in the yard, which involves loud shouting, pretend sword fights, and a level of chaos the actual Roman legions would envy. You try to keep them from reenacting last year's gladiator show after what happened to the garden fence, but it's a losing battle. And through it all, your mother-in-law keeps watch. She appears at just the wrong moment, arms folded, ready with helpful advice. We never had leaks in my day, and occasional reminders that her stews were never lumpy and her tunics never ripped. You nod, smile, and resist the urge to hand her a needle and the mending pile. By midday, you're only halfway through the list and already daydreaming about a world where chores just stop, maybe in the afterlife. But you soldier on, finding pride in each small victory, a mended sock, a patched roof, a chicken herded in the right direction. No one writes epics about the chores, but they are the real backbone of your world. When the sun finally sets, the list is shorter, sort of. The animals are fed, the clothes are hung, and you even found time to fix a sandal strap. There's satisfaction in survival, in order carved out of chaos, even if tomorrow's list looks exactly the same. You collapse by the fire, exhausted but undefeated. In the endless cycle of chores, sometimes just keeping up is its own kind of triumph. When the sun rises, so do you, right into the fields. You weed, dig, sow, and harvest with a group of equally exhausted women, all praying the landlord doesn't show up with extra taxes or new rules. Your hands are calloused, your back is a lost cause. Welcome to the agricultural engine room of the Roman Empire. Endless rows of wheat, barley, beans, and hope. Field work is not just a job, it's a marathon. There's no coffee to kickstart your morning, just a chilly breeze and the memory of last night's dinner, if you can call it that. Your tools are simple: a battered wooden hoe, a basket with a wobbly handle, and a knife that's seen better centuries. You join the line of women trudging to the fields, tunics already streaked with last week's mud and this morning's dew. There's little conversation at first. Everyone is too busy plotting the day's work, or perhaps just fantasizing about a day off. Spoiler, there isn't one. Children tag along, armed with tiny baskets, learning early that fieldwork is a family affair. Toddlers pick weeds, older kids try to look busy, and every so often you catch one gnawing on a beet and calling it breakfast. The work itself is a cycle: plant, weed, water, repeat. Digging into the rocky earth is a special kind of punishment. and the soil always seems to fight back. One day, it's too hard, the next, it's too soggy. You spend hours on your knees, fingers numb, yanking out weeds that seem to multiply out of spite. The sun climbs higher, and so does your determination. You scrape at the dirt, coaxing life from land that honestly seems more interested in growing stones than anything edible. And then there's the landlord. Nothing interrupts the delicate flow of field work like the sight of the landlord's steward striding across the field, ledger in hand and frown at the ready. Maybe today they've decided to increase your rent, add a new tax on beet tops, or just remind you whose land you're breaking your back to work. You offer a tight-lipped smile, answer questions, and silently wish for a miracle, maybe a plague of weevils, but only on his wheat. Harvest season is another level of chaos. The days are long, the work is frantic, and every able hand is pressed into service. You move through the fields with a scythe or sickle, sweating in the hot sun, praying the rain holds off until every last sheaf is stacked. There's no room for mistakes. A bad harvest isn't just a bad month, it's hunger, arguments, and plenty of finger-pointing. You count the bundles, compare them to last year's miserable haul, and sigh as the landlord's cart arrives to collect his share, meaning most of it. Lunch break, if you can call it a break, is a quick bite of cold bread, maybe an onion or a few dried figs. You sit in the dust, legs stretched out, chatting with friends about anything but work. Someone always manages to sneak in a laugh, usually at the expense of last year's disastrous attempt to plant chickpeas. But as soon as you've swallowed your last crumb, it's back to the grind. Throughout the day, the work never stops. If you pause to stretch your back, you risk falling behind. If you linger too long, your fellow labourers send you a look that says, "Nice try, but we're all suffering here." The hours blur, dig, sow, weed, repeat. The only real break comes when a flock of sheep gets loose or a neighbour's goat decides to join the harvest, nibbling your crops with reckless abandon. By sundown, you're coated in sweat, dust, and a vague sense of accomplishment. You trudge home, basket much lighter than your limbs, stomach rumbling and spirit just battered enough to start dreaming about tomorrow's rain. You've earned your aches, your blisters, and your calluses. They're badges of survival in a world where every meal depends on today's labour. So you drag yourself home, feet heavy, head spinning, and collapse by the hearth. Field work in ancient Rome. It's brutal, it's endless, and it's entirely backbreaking by design. But you do it all again tomorrow, because if you don't, well, let's just say nobody wants to see what happens when the landlord finds an empty field. You are pregnant. Again. Childbirth in ancient Rome is less about baby showers, more about survival. You rely on the village midwife, a handful of dried herbs, and luck. There's no epidural. There's only hope, and a very loud chicken outside the door. The first sign labour is coming is never gentle. It's the deep ache in your back, the tightening in your belly, and the chorus of your mother-in-law declaring that it's time, as if her tone alone might speed things up. Word spreads fast. Within minutes, a parade of neighbours, cousins, and children gathers at the door, all eager to help, or at the very least, to gossip about how you're handling it compared to Flavia down the road, who barely made a sound. There's no private birthing suite. You get the family's only straw pallet, a scratchy blanket, and whatever privacy you can bargain for. The midwife arrives, a whirlwind of confidence, herbs, and stern instructions. She smells of garlic, smoke, and absolute authority. In her battered pouch are all the tools you can hope for. A rusty knife, some twine, a dried root, and a talisman or two for luck. She's delivered half the village and scares even the most stubborn goat into silence. Labour is a long, sweaty ordeal. You squeeze your sister's hand until she begs for mercy. The children are banished, but you can hear them whispering and giggling in the next room. The family dog tries to nose his way under the blanket. Meanwhile, the midwife mutters a steady stream of prayers to Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth, while also shouting practical advice: breathe, push, stop screaming, you'll scare the chickens. Pain relief, in this world, is a myth. At best, you get a cup of weak wine and some dried willow bark chewed to a bitter pulp. Mostly, you get encouragement and the occasional slap to the knee for dramatic effect. Your back aches, your mind races, and every cramp feels like a punishment for every slightly snarky thing you ever said about the neighbor's stew. You pray, bargain, curse, and, at some point, promise to build a small shrine if only this baby arrives healthy and with minimal fuss. Outside, life goes on as usual. The fire crackles, someone starts dinner, and the world waits. Inside, time stretches and blurs. The midwife and your mother-in-law trade opinions over your head, arguing about the best time to cut the cord and which god is most likely to listen to desperate pleas. Every so often, the midwife thrusts a dried herb under your nose, declaring it essential for strength. It smells like week-old laundry, and you suspect it's mostly for her own entertainment. After what feels like a century, the moment finally arrives. The midwife, fierce and focused, takes command. There's one last push, 2, 3, and suddenly cries fill the air. Relief, tears, and utter exhaustion crash over you all at once. The baby is here, and whether it's a boy, girl, or surprise, everyone cheers. The midwife wraps the baby in the least dirty cloth she can find and places them in your arms, beaming like she's just won an Olympic event. There's no Instagram announcement, no pink or blue cupcakes, just the ancient, overwhelming relief of survival. If you're lucky, both you and the baby make it through. If not, there's mourning, candles, and a quiet place in village memory for another mother lost to the hazards of ancient life. Childbirth is never taken for granted. Each child is a small miracle. Each mother a survivor. As you lie there, dazed and proud, the world rushes back in. The family parades through, neighbors peek in, and the chicken, yes, that chicken, finally stops making a racket, satisfied that she's witnessed another addition to the peasant circus. There's laughter, tears, and the first of many whispered prayers of gratitude. Tonight, you'll try to rest, the baby tucked close, knowing that the work of keeping everyone alive is only just beginning. In ancient Rome, childbirth is the ultimate gamble. Pain, prayer, and no guarantees. But for a moment, in the glow of lamplight and midwife's praise, you let yourself feel victorious. You did it, you survived. And for now, that is enough. You are outnumbered by your children, who are, in turn, outnumbered by their own scrapes and bruises. Kids roam barefoot, climb everything, and find new ways to terrify you daily. Discipline is a mix of stern looks, loud threats, and strategic bribery with leftover figs. Roman peasant children seem to possess limitless energy, little common sense, and an uncanny ability to find trouble in places you didn't know existed. The first rule of childhood: the dirtier you are, the more fun you've had. The second: if you come home with the same number of teeth you started with, it's been a good day. Your mornings begin with a head count and an inspection for injuries. A scraped knee, a stubbed toe, and someone missing half an eyebrow. Just the usual. You barely blink when a child announces he's caught a snake for the stew, or when another cheerfully displays a frog tucked into her tunic for luck. The village dog tags along as an unofficial chaperone, but he's mostly there to steal any food the kids drop, or to join in the mud-rolling contests. School for your brood is more theory than practice. Most days, education happens in the fields, the kitchen, and the marketplace. The nearest real school is for rich city kids anyway, not for the sons and daughters of people who spend their days with their hands in the dirt. You teach them to count using beans, to read the sky for signs of rain, and to avoid the neighbor's goose, who's never forgiven anyone for anything. Playtime is barely distinguishable from danger. If there's a wall, they climb it. If there's a tree, they fall out of it. The village fountain is both a swimming pool and an obstacle course. Games include Chase the Chicken, who can throw a rock the farthest, and the ever-popular Let's See If We Can Catch the Landlord's Pig. Every parent in the village is an expert in first aid, or at least in finding clean rags and hoping for the best. Of course, the risk of serious injury is always present. There are cuts, sprains, and the occasional broken arm, set by the village midwife and splinted with the nearest straight stick. You keep a stash of dried herbs for bruises and a bottle of cheap wine for yourself. The kids, remarkably resilient, are usually back in the fray before the bread cools on the table. Discipline is a performance, equal parts drama and negotiation. A well-timed glare can freeze most mischief, unless you're up against a particularly ambitious 5-year-old. You threaten extra chores, dock dessert rations, and promise to tell the local priest about their bad behavior, a threat that rarely works, but makes you feel better. Bribery with figs, honey, or the last bit of cheese is surprisingly effective, though you suspect the kids have started planning infractions just for the rewards. Family life is communal and loud. Siblings argue, form alliances, and occasionally team up to create chaos. Older children are roped into caring for the younger ones, which results in a slightly feral version of babysitting. You overhear the oldest explaining to the youngest that you can't actually get adopted by the emperor. So, stop trying. You let it go. Some lessons are best learned through disappointment. Cleanliness is a fantasy. If you manage to wash a face or two before dinner, it's a personal victory. Baths are rare, and everyone just accepts that children will be vaguely brown from head to toe. You sigh, wipe the mud from a forehead, and move on. Yet despite the constant scrapes, stains, and sibling skirmishes, there's a strange joy in it all. Your children are hardy, clever, and stubborn as oxen. They invent games, solve problems, and, most days, come home hungry and smiling. You watch them race across the yard, barefoot and free, and remember that even in hard times, laughter is a luxury you can actually afford. So you patch up another bruise, hand out a few more stern warnings, and sneak a smile when you think no one's looking. Raising Roman kids is a wild ride, equal parts terror and pride. If you survive another day with everyone more or less intact, you count it as a victory and reward yourself with the last fig. You've earned it. Roman men are everywhere, telling stories, offering advice, and occasionally helping by getting in the way. Your husband's best skill is napping through chores. Your neighbor's best skill is complaining about your laundry. You smile politely and get back to work. In the grand pageant of ancient Roman life, men are the self-appointed narrators, wisdom givers, and part-time philosophers. At least, that's what they like to believe. In reality, their most reliable contribution is commentary. Often as you're struggling with a basket of wet laundry or coaxing a fire back to life, your husband wanders over, yawns theatrically, and proceeds to explain how his mother used to start the fire with a single spark. You nod, while secretly thinking he's never managed to light anything more than his own nap schedule. Fathers and uncles drift in and out of the household, popping up at mealtimes and during festival days, eager to regale the children with stories of when I was your age. These tales grow more exaggerated with each telling. By the end of summer, your father-in-law has wrestled at least 3 wolves and survived a dozen famines, all without getting his sandals dirty. It's impressive, in a fictional kind of way. Neighbors are an entirely different breed. The older men see themselves as guardians of village tradition and neighborhood order, which means they're contractually obligated to have opinions about everything. If your husband fixes the roof, the neighbor will appear to explain how, in his day, roofs were built to withstand actual Roman legions. If you hang your laundry too close to the olive tree, you'll get an impromptu lesson in botany and a stern lecture about the dangers of damp linens. You nod and promise to do better. Then go back to hanging the wash exactly where you always do. When it comes to chores, the men of the house have a variety of tactics for involvement. Some hover, offering helpful suggestions from the safety of a nearby bench, while others attempt a show of muscle, moving a log or turning soil with grand, sweeping gestures. These efforts are usually short-lived and quickly followed by a sudden memory of an important errand at the local tavern. You carry on, undeterred, content in the knowledge that a husband's enthusiasm for fieldwork is inversely proportional to the temperature outside. Mealtimes are prime time for male contributions, mainly in the form of complaints about portion sizes, spice levels, or the lack of pork this week. If there's wine, they'll launch into deep discussions about politics, harvests, and whether the emperor's new law on water rights will ruin the neighborhood. Consensus: yes, definitely. The children watch, fascinated and occasionally horrified, as their uncles debate who once ate the spiciest radish or which festival dance is most likely to summon a rainstorm. Occasionally, you encounter the rare helpful man. He fetches water, chops wood, and doesn't offer a running commentary on how you should do it. If he exists, you guard him like a state secret, knowing every woman in the village will want to borrow him for the next communal oven cleaning. But for the most part, male usefulness is limited to emergencies. Or, if you're really lucky, fixing that stubborn door latch after 3 months of promises. And then there's the social side. Men gather at the local tavern or village square, swapping tales, playing dice, and exchanging gossip at twice the speed and half the accuracy of the women. Any news, no matter how trivial, is dissected, analysed, and transformed into legend by sunset. If someone's goat goes missing, the men are first to form a search party. Translation: sit by the fire and speculate wildly over wine. Despite all this, there's a comfort in the familiar routine of shared roles and rolling eyes. You tune out the background noise, get your work done, and occasionally toss a wry comment into the fray. Sometimes, the men surprise you with a burst of actual help, a story that makes you laugh, or a rare moment of quiet partnership. So you keep moving, folding, mending, scolding, and smiling while the men orbit the household, always just close enough to offer advice but rarely close enough to pick up a broom. In the grand mosaic of Roman peasant life, dealing with men is just another pattern you learn to weave, thread by thread, with patience, wit, and the quiet knowledge that you're the real force holding everything together. Keeping up with village gossip is more work than the actual farm. Who's fighting? Who's marrying? Whose goat ate? Whose vegetables? Knowing it all is vital for survival. One wrong rumour, and you're shunned at the next communal bake-off. Social life in the Roman countryside is a delicate web, and every day is another round of what might be history's oldest group chat. Before you even leave your front door, you're already eavesdropping on a heated argument drifting through the thin wall from next door. Who stole whose onions? Who caught the baker's apprentice behind the barn? Who is, allegedly, on their third marriage, even though the ink isn't dry on the second? Every detail matters, because in a world where your reputation is worth more than your actual goats, information is the ultimate currency. The well is the epicenter of local intrigue. What begins as a simple water run turns into a marathon session of updates, accusations, and dramatic reenactments. You clutch your jug, smile politely, and try to keep your face neutral as 3 women debate whether Lucia's new baby looks more like the shepherd or the wine merchant. If you keep quiet, you're suspected of knowing something. If you speak up, you might accidentally launch a feud. It's a balancing act worthy of a circus performer, and there's always a risk that today's harmless comment becomes tomorrow's scandal. It's not all malicious. There's a strange kind of community in the constant chattering. Your neighbor brings you the news that someone's rooster is missing. And that someone blames you, by the way. The old woman 2 doors down remembers every detail of everyone's business from the last 30 years, and her memory is both your best defense and greatest threat. You keep her on your good side, with a steady stream of slightly burnt bread and fresh gossip about anyone who isn't family. If something happens in the village, anything at all, rest assured it will be public knowledge before the chickens have finished breakfast. Did your eldest slip and land in the mud? The news will reach your mother-in-law and half the province before you've washed out the stain. accidentally burn a loaf of bread? Someone will turn it into a tale of how you nearly set the entire village ablaze. Lose a sandal? There will be a running tally of how many times you've managed to misplace footwear this year alone. There's an unspoken pecking order among the gossips. Some are master storytellers, able to spin a missing carrot into an epic tragedy. Others are relentless fact-checkers, always ready to call out an exaggeration. The stakes are high: social status, invitations to feast days, and, most importantly, access to the best spot at the communal oven. If you fall out of favour, your bread will mysteriously fail to rise, and your turnips will never be quite as plump as your neighbours, at least, according to public opinion. You try to stay above the fray, but sometimes the best defence is a good offence. You drop an innocent comment about the landlord's new boots, or mention, ever so quietly, that you heard someone's goat was caught raiding the basil patch again. It's a game of whispers, and everyone's playing. The key is never to lie, just to imply. That way, if things get heated, you can always claim innocence and blame the misunderstanding on the wind. Even celebrations come with a side of drama. Weddings spark debates over dowries, guest lists, and who's wearing last year's tunic. Feasts are opportunities to showcase your best dish while quietly inspecting everyone else's, and funerals inevitably become a forum for settling old scores. Every event is a new round of intrigue, and it's crucial to know which way the wind and the rumours are blowing. Through it all, you navigate with caution. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and your best bread recipe secret. One slip, one missed social cue, and you might spend the next month outside the inner circle, eating cold bread and wondering why your invitations keep getting lost. Still, there's comfort in knowing that, for all the sniping and scheming, the gossip mill is what holds the village together. It's messy, noisy, and sometimes cruel, but it's also the glue of community. And tomorrow, the whole cycle begins again. New stories, fresh scandals, and the eternal dance of Roman social politics. If you can survive that, you can survive anything. Roman gods need their daily due, so you leave offerings of stale bread or wilted herbs at the household shrine. Your day is a blur of rituals, prayers, and side-eyeing the neighbour who skipped Jupiter's feast day last week. Religion in ancient Rome isn't just about temple visits or public ceremonies. It's baked into the very dough of your daily life, right next to the occasional weevil. Your family's humble shrine sits in the corner of the house, decked out with little clay figures, a chipped cup or two, and the sort of offerings that wouldn't tempt a hungry dog: crusts of bread, shriveled grapes, and a wilted sprig of rosemary if you're feeling especially pious. You're not aiming for divine favour so much as avoiding divine irritation. After all, it's never a good time to find out you've annoyed Mars or forgotten to thank Vesta for not burning down your kitchen yet. The first prayer of the day is whispered before sunrise, muttered half awake as you throw a crust onto the shrine. Let the sheep not eat the beans. Let the landlord forget about this month's taxes. Let the children avoid falling into the well. In a world where control is an illusion and luck is suspiciously rare, you'll take any supernatural help you can get. Throughout the day, the rituals continue. Light a lamp and mumble a blessing. Spill wine and make the sign against bad luck. Step on the wrong side of the threshold and quickly double back, just in case. The line between religion and superstition is about as blurry as your vision before breakfast. You find yourself knocking wood, crossing fingers, and tying little strings around wrists to ward off the evil eye. Forget to do one thing, and you're convinced it's why the bread didn't rise or the goat escaped. It's never your fault, just a vengeful household spirit with a grudge. Neighbours keep close tabs on your devotional performance. Skip a feast day, and someone will mention it, casual as a thunderclap. Didn't see you at Juno's festival last week. Hope everything is all right. If your child falls ill or your beans rot in the ground, whispers circle faster than a Roman chariot. The communal oven doubles as the communal confessional, where every missed ritual becomes a topic of lively discussion and well-meaning advice on which god you've offended. Festivals are equal parts, religious observance and social event. You attend out of obligation and the faint hope of a free meal. There are rituals for planting, rituals for harvesting, rituals for avoiding disasters that only happen to other people, unless you mess up the ritual, in which case, disaster has your name on it. The priest makes the rounds, blessing everything from newborns to turnip patches, and you line up for your share, pretending not to care about your neighbour's smug smile when the priest spends an extra minute at their door. Superstition fills the gaps between official rituals. Did you hear a crow at midnight? Bad luck for the next harvest. Did your lamp sputter out before bedtime? Time to offer a double portion of barley to the Lares, just to be safe. Your mother swears by old remedies, hanging garlic over the door, spitting 3 times at the sight of a black cat, and never ever lending bread on a Tuesday. The children, naturally, find all of this endlessly entertaining. They invent new rituals just to see if you'll fall for them. We have to hop 3 times before dinner or the bread burns. You sigh, humour them, and wonder if maybe, just maybe, it's working. Anything to keep the chaos at bay. At the end of the day, as you light the evening lamp and mumble your final prayers, you take comfort in the routine. Maybe the gods aren't always listening. Maybe the superstitions don't really work. But in a world where so much is uncertain, these small acts make you feel a little less powerless. You tuck the children in, toss another crust onto the shrine, and hope for an uneventful night. Religion in ancient Rome isn't about grand gestures or unwavering faith. It's a running negotiation, pleading, bargaining, and hedging your bets against the unknown. You give what you can, do what you must, and hope the gods are as forgiving of small mistakes as you are with your own children. If nothing else, you're pretty sure that keeping Jupiter happy is worth a few extra loaves of stale bread, just in case. Medicine is mostly hope, and whatever plant your aunt swears worked for her cousin's rash. Doctors are for the rich. You rely on herbal teas, honey, and, if things get dire, a priest with opinions about demons. In ancient Rome, the sick room is less hospital and more experimental garden. Your medicine cabinet consists of bundles of dried herbs, a sticky jar of honey, and an impressive collection of advice from relatives, most of which sounds suspiciously like superstition in a toga. If you ever get genuinely ill, everyone becomes an expert. Your mother-in-law is quick to recommend boiling a certain weed in goat milk, just like her grandmother did, while your neighbour insists you should sleep with garlic under your pillow, if only to keep away the actual garlic thieves. The real healers, the ones with fancy Greek names and actual knowledge, are too busy tending the local senator's gout or some nobleman's anxiety about bad omens. For everyone else, medicine is mostly a blend of hope, tradition, and whatever you can forage without getting stung, bitten, or accused of witchcraft. The most sophisticated tool at your disposal is a mortar and pestle that's seen more use as a doorstop than as a medical instrument. The most common remedies are herbal teas and infusions. Feeling feverish? Time for willow bark tea, if you can stand the taste. Upset stomach? Peppermint leaves, dried and boiled until they resemble pond water, are the go-to cure. Every ailment has a plant associated with it. Coughs, rashes, headaches, and, most mysteriously, the evil eye, which is a catch-all diagnosis for everything from stomach aches to general bad luck. Honey is the ancient Roman miracle cure. A spoonful for sore throats, a dab on wounds, and, if you can spare it, a sweetener for those revolting teas. Honey is said to cure everything, from lovesickness to infected cuts, although the jury's still out on whether it can fix a bad hair day or a neighbour's tendency to gossip. Still, you trust it more than anything the goat herder recommends. For bruises and sprains, you rely on poultices, a mix of mashed leaves, mud, and maybe a little animal fat, slathered generously on the problem area and bandaged with whatever clean cloth you can find, so none. The pain is supposed to draw out the bad humours. You're not sure it works, but at least it gives the kids something new to complain about. When the situation gets serious, a fever that won't break, a wound that won't heal. The options get creative, if not desperate. You might send for the local wise woman, who arrives with a bag of dried roots and a handful of prayers to every god she can name. She chants, waves, smoke around the room, and recommends bathing in a stream at sunrise while reciting something about Jupiter. Or, if all else fails, you call in the priest, who gives your house a stern look, throws holy water on everything, and blames the neighbor's cat for inviting evil spirits inside. Of course, no discussion of ancient health would be complete without mentioning the leeches. If you're unlucky enough to be bled, the process involves sharp knives, much muttering, and the distinct sense that this is helping no one. Still, you put your faith in whatever remedy sounds least likely to actually kill you. After all, the alternative is letting your aunt experiment with boiled mouse again, and no one wants to repeat that fiasco. Sanitation is a constant struggle. You do your best. Boil the water, sweep out the house, shoo the dog away from open wounds, and hope the children don't drink from the ditch again. Sickness travels fast in close quarters, and recovery often comes down to sheer luck, and who can sleep through the worst of it. And yet, somehow, people survive. The combination of herbs, honey, and sheer stubbornness gets you through the endless parade of coughs, cuts, and curious rashes. Each time someone pulls through, you chalk it up to the gods, or maybe just a particularly effective batch of peppermint tea. At the end of the day, you tuck in your children, send up a hopeful prayer, and prepare another herbal concoction for whoever sneezed at dinner. Medicine in ancient Rome may be more faith than fact, but hope is sometimes the strongest cure you have. And if not, well, at least you have plenty of honey. Death is an ever-present houseguest. Children, parents, friends, no one is safe. Grief is loud, public, and interrupted only by chores. You cope by working harder, and telling yourself the afterlife has to be less exhausting than this. In the Roman countryside, you grow up understanding that life is a fragile thing, as unpredictable as the weather or the village oven. Sickness comes without warning, accidents are a fact of life, and old age is a luxury few achieve. You never get used to the empty spaces at the dinner mat, the quiet where there used to be laughter, or the way chores pile up when someone is suddenly gone. The rhythm of daily life, already relentless, doesn't pause for mourning. Cows still need milking. Bread still needs baking. Children, confused and tear-streaked, need comfort and breakfast in the same breath. Grieving in ancient Rome is not a private affair. News spreads fast. The whole village knows before you've had a chance to catch your breath. There are rituals to follow and traditions to uphold, all designed to help the living as much as honor the dead. Neighbors stream in to pay their respects, carrying gifts of bread, beans, or the last withered bunch of grapes from the garden. The house fills with voices, some offering comfort, others quietly judging how well you're keeping it together. The funeral itself is a blur. Wailing is not just allowed, it's encouraged. The louder the grief, the greater the respect shown to the departed. Professional mourners, yes, that's a thing, might even join in, out-sobbing everyone in a sort of competitive display of heartbreak. Children peek from behind tunics, caught between curiosity and the uncomfortable realization that death is, indeed, a family event. You light candles, recite prayers, and offer coins for Charon, the ferryman who, according to every wise aunt, will only take you across the river to the afterlife if your fare is paid. You hope the gods are watching kindly, or at least not paying attention to the little slip-ups. A fumbled blessing, a forgotten herb on the funeral pyre, a dog howling at the wrong moment. You feel the loss in your bones, but you push through the motions. Life goes on, even when you wish it wouldn't for a day or two. Grief doesn't stop for household emergencies. The fire still needs tending. The roof always leaks at the worst possible time. Your mother-in-law sighs a little louder, and the neighbors bring casseroles that taste like sorrow and too much lentil. Every bite is a reminder that the departed is gone, that life will never be quite the same, and that tomorrow you'll have to get up and do it all again. You mourn in snatches while kneading dough, sweeping the hearth, or mending a tunic. Tears are wiped away with the same rag you use for dusting. There's no time for long soliloquies by candlelight. Your grief is threaded through every task, every shared look across the table, every hollow laugh that doesn't quite reach your eyes. The children process loss in their own chaotic ways. Some ask questions, endlessly, urgently, while others retreat into quietness or mischief. You do your best to answer, to reassure, to explain the inexplicable. Sometimes you lie awake at night, wondering if you said the right words, or if there even are right words. The Roman afterlife is as full of rules and rituals as daily life, and you hope, desperately, that your loved ones have found some rest, because no one seems to find much of it here. Time dulls the sharpness, eventually. Grief settles like dust, always present but easier to ignore as days and seasons pass. You find comfort in routine and in the resilience of the living. Laughter returns, gardens grow, and the dog, as always, finds a way to sneak into bed on cold nights. Stories are told, some exaggerated, some softened, about those who've gone, and memories become both a comfort and a warning. Love deeply, work hard, and never skip a festival in case it's your last. So you carry on. You fold the grief into your daily bread, you whisper prayers as you sweep, and you remind yourself that the best way to honor the dead is to keep living, loudly, stubbornly, and with as much laughter as you can muster. In ancient Rome, death is the end of a life, but never the end of the story. Whether it's rain turning the dirt floor into a swamp or sun baking your only dress into a sweat-soaked towel, the weather hates you. You dream of sandals that don't dissolve in puddles, or maybe a year without mouldy ceilings. Roman peasant life is basically a long-term, passive-aggressive relationship with the elements. There is no perfect season, just varying levels of misery and new, creative ways for nature to ruin your day. Rainy season, the sky opens up and transforms your humble hovel into the world's least appealing spa. The roof, which bravely kept out the weather all summer, now leaks in 5 places, strategically positioned to drip directly onto your sleeping mat, your best tunic, and, just for variety, the one bowl of barley porridge you were looking forward to. If your floor is dirt, and it is, because you're not an emperor, you quickly learn the difference between damp and quicksand. Overnight, the house shifts from merely cold and drafty to resembling the marshes outside Pompeii. You squelch across the room, slippers sinking, trying not to think about what's floating in the puddles. Every step is a surprise. Is it mud? Is it goat? Is it just the universe making a point? Dry days are rare, but when they come, they bring their own set of problems. The sun bakes the land, hardening the mud into ruts that threaten to snap your ankle at a moment's notice. Your only dress goes from soggy to stiff, plastered to your skin 1 hour, and then dry and itchy as a sack of straw the next. You dream of linen and loose clothing, but settle for airing out your wool cloak on the fence, praying that the neighbour's goat doesn't develop a taste for damp fabric. Let's talk footwear. Sandals are essential until they're not. In the wet, they soak up every drop, transforming into portable swamps that squish with every step. In the sun, they bake into inflexible torture devices that give you impressive blisters, then fall apart just when you need them to stay on. The cobbler is a regular guest in your home, fixing broken straps and quietly judging your inability to avoid puddles. Sometimes you think of going barefoot, but then you remember last week's surprise in the pig pen and decide against it. The mold is a character in its own right, quietly spreading along the edges of the ceiling and floor. You scrub and sweep, but it always comes back, flourishing in every hidden corner. It's a losing battle. Your laundry never quite dries, your bread grows its own fur, and even the family dog smells faintly of mildew half the year. You've started naming the largest patches, mostly for your own sanity. Of course, there's the wind, the ancient Roman equivalent of an air conditioning unit, only much louder and less predictable. It howls through every gap, scattering ashes, blowing out your oil lamp, and carrying away important items like washing, roof tiles, and occasionally your patience. It is a source of endless entertainment for the children, who race around trying to catch stray leaves and shriek when the door slams open in the middle of dinner. But the worst days are when the weather can't make up its mind. It rains for an hour, then the sun comes out and tries to steam cook your house like a cabbage. You never know what to wear, so you layer everything and end up looking like a sheep in the world's saddest fashion show. The roof leaks, the mud thickens, the heat arrives, and you stand in the doorway, shaking your fist at the sky, daring it to try something new. Yet, like everything else, you adapt. You spread straw over the worst puddles, hang your clothes anywhere that isn't currently leaking, and perfect the art of patching sandals with bits of string and hope. You know the precise angle to tilt your head to avoid the drip above your pillow, and the exact time of day to open the door for maximum fresh air and minimum livestock escape. In the end, you make peace with the weather, mostly, because in ancient Rome you can fight the elements or you can laugh at them. And sometimes, a good laugh, preferably under a dry patch of roof, is the only thing that really keeps you warm. Night brings cold, bugs, and the uneasy feeling that someone's sheep is plotting revenge. You secure the door with a rope, pray for quiet, and hope the fire doesn't go out. If the stars are out, you count them, anything to distract from the itchiness. As dusk creeps across the countryside, a hush settles over your small Roman world. The fields empty. The clatter of daytime chores gives way to the distant barking of dogs, and a chorus of frogs takes over where the children left off. For a few precious minutes, there's a sense of peace, until you remember it's nearly bedtime, and with that comes a whole new set of nightly challenges. First, you do a final check of the house. Did you bank the fire? If not, you'll wake to a room colder than a patrician's heart, and spend half the morning coaxing a flame from embers that would rather die than cooperate. Next, you inspect the makeshift lock, a rope, a stick, or, if you're feeling fancy, a large rock wedged against the door. You hope it keeps out both prowlers and particularly adventurous goats. Security isn't about keeping out legions or wild animals. It's about convincing your neighbor's sheep to sleep in their own hovel for once. With the family huddled close, you try to find a comfortable spot in the family pile. No easy feat when every blanket smells faintly of goat, and half the household seems determined to snore as loudly as possible. You negotiate space, settle arguments over who gets the good corner, and spend several minutes evicting the chicken who thinks she's earned a spot by the fire. Personal space is just a rumor at this hour. If the air is cold, and it usually is, you pile on every tunic, cloak, and rag in the house, turning yourself into a lumpy woolen fortress. The trick is balancing warmth and breathability. Too many layers, and you wake up soaked in sweat. Too few, and the night wind slips in through every crack, nipping at your toes and ears. No matter what, you're never fully comfortable, but you're too tired to care. As everyone finally begins to settle, the bugs arrive. Fleas, lice, and mosquitoes are your constant nighttime companions, more persistent than your mother-in-law and much less entertaining. You scratch, sigh, and try to ignore the occasional tickle on your scalp or ankles. If you're lucky, you fall asleep before the bites drive you completely mad. If not, you can always listen to the night sounds, the creak of the roof, the distant howl of a wolf, and the muffled complaints of the neighbor arguing with his donkey again. With luck, the fire's low glow keeps away the worst of the chill and the darkest of your worries. Sometimes you whisper prayers to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, hoping for a quiet night and an undisturbed morning. It's hard not to let your thoughts wander. Did you lock up the grain? Is the roof finally going to cave in? Did you remember to thank the gods for surviving another day? These thoughts keep you up, so you turn your attention to the stars. If the sky is clear, you count the constellations, a habit from childhood. You try to spot Jupiter, Imagine Mars marching across the heavens, and invent your own stories for the twinkling lights above. The children drift off beside you, their breathing slowing, the night silence broken only by the occasional giggle or midnight foot in your face. But you never quite let your guard down. Even asleep, you're half listening for trouble. Footsteps outside, the cry of a sick child, or the distant warning bark of a neighbor's dog. The world is rarely quiet, and true safety is always a little bit out of reach. Still, you survive each night, much like you do each day, by holding your family close, clinging to small comforts, and laughing whenever you can. Tomorrow's worries will come soon enough. For now, you wrap yourself in every blanket you own, count a few more stars, and let yourself drift into dreams where, if you're lucky, the only thing that keeps you awake is the gentle snoring of the people you love. In ancient Rome, a peaceful night is the greatest luxury of all. On rare feast days, you get a break, sort of. There's singing, maybe a sweet cake, definitely more spilled wine. You dance badly, forget your worries, and for one shining moment, almost feel like a goddess. Then it's back to the grind. Festivals in the Roman countryside are a patchwork of joy stitched into lives otherwise filled with chores, aches, and the dull thud of routine. The very mention of a festival sends a ripple of anticipation through the village. Children whisper about sweet treats and the possibility of juggling displays. The elders start stockpiling stories from the last 10 years, most of them wildly exaggerated, and every family secretly hopes that this year, at last, the rain will hold off until the celebration ends. Preparation begins days in advance. You scrub your best tunic, the one with only 2 patches, dust off your worn sandals, and try to wrangle the children into at least looking clean for the afternoon. Your husband insists he needs to conserve his strength for dancing, which mostly means finding new ways to nap while you polish spoons and debate whether your neighbor's honey cake recipe really does include sawdust. When the big day arrives, the entire village transforms. The field that's usually full of goats becomes a stage for musicians with battered lyres and a pair of enthusiastic drummers. Tables groan under the weight of food, loaves of bread, wheels of cheese, and on very lucky days, a roasted pig or a heap of fresh fruit. The kids are wild with excitement, running circles around the grown-ups, already sticky with the first drips of honey and wine. The women slip away for last-minute gossip and to trade tiny gifts, ribbons, beads, or a secret recipe. You all giggle about whose husband is most likely to trip during the opening dance and who will embarrass herself by singing off-key. For a moment, the worries of daily life, taxes, bad weather, broken tools fade into the background. Even the stern old grandmother allows herself a laugh, though she still keeps one eye on the bread table like a hawk in a scarf. The festival is a feast for the senses. There's music, laughter, and the thrum of dancing feet. The air is heavy with the scent of roasting meat, herbs, and the ever-present tang of spilt wine. Every now and then, you catch a whiff of the river or the pigsty, just to remind you not to get too comfortable. You eat with both hands, tearing off chunks of bread, sneaking a fig or two, and trading bites with friends. Games and competitions fill the afternoon. The men boast and show off in sack races and friendly wrestling matches that inevitably end in someone complaining about a pulled muscle. Children play games of tag, chasing each other through the crowd and nearly knocking over the village priest. There are prizes for the best singing, the most outlandish story, and of course, the flattest cake, which is considered a culinary achievement in itself. And then, as evening falls, the dancing begins in earnest. You're not much of a dancer, nobody is really, but you let yourself be pulled into the crowd. Someone claps, someone sings, and for a few glorious minutes you spin, sway, and forget about the goats, the chores, and the mountain of laundry waiting at home. You feel light, dizzy, and, dare you say it, almost young. For one night, you are not just a peasant, not just someone's mother or wife. You are a part of something bigger, a riot of colour, sound, and fleeting happiness. The festival is a reminder that there is more to life than endless work and muddy sandals. It is a celebration of survival, of community, and of the stubborn joy that refuses to be snuffed out by hardship. Eventually, the music fades, the torches burn low, and you find yourself heading home, arm in arm with your children and your yawning spouse. You tuck the memory of the day away like a hidden coin, something to warm you during the long, hard weeks ahead. Tomorrow, the grind resumes. The fields, the laundry, the endless list of chores. But tonight, you drift into sleep with sore feet, a full belly, and just a little hope. In ancient Rome, escape isn't about running away. Sometimes, it's simply dancing badly in a muddy field, laughing with your friends, and feeling, just for a moment, almost divine. At the end of the day, you pass down every survival tip: how to mend sandals with string, where to hide the good bread, and why you never trust a rooster. Your daughters listen, laugh, and complain, but you know someday they'll be grateful for your wisdom and for not having to invent running water. Teaching your daughters is a daily act of both practicality and defiance. You know they'll never have an easy life, so you arm them with every trick, shortcut, and secret you've managed to collect through years of trial, error, and emergency repairs. It starts early. Your youngest toddles after you with wide eyes, clutching a rag doll stitched from last year's torn tunic. She watches as you mend a torn cloak, copy your quick-fingered knot, and ask the sorts of questions that would terrify the village priest. You show them how to knead dough without ending up stuck elbow deep in it, and how to tell when the yeast has gone on strike again. You demonstrate the art of stretching a meal, how to make yesterday's stew look new, and how to turn 3 sad beans into a respectable soup. You laugh together over the endless battle with bread that's determined to become a rock, and you teach them the sacred trick of hiding a honeycomb at the back of the pantry, safe from brothers and chickens alike. Your daughters learn that laundry isn't just about scrubbing but about timing. Never start just before the sky clouds over, and always bring a friend to trade gossip while you work the stains out with ashes and hope. You show them how to fix a tunic so the patch is nearly invisible, or, failing that, how to own it proudly and turn every new tear into a story for the well. You explain why shoes are never left by the door, unless you want to offer them as tribute to the neighbor's sneaky dog. Discipline is equal parts sharp tongue and gentle hand. You teach your girls to hold their ground in a crowd, to barter at the market with a steady voice, and to never let anyone, man, beast, or neighbor, push them aside. When someone tries to cheat them out of an egg or a place in the breadline, you remind them of your own victories and losses and encourage them to invent new comebacks for the next time. You coach them in the ancient art of keeping a secret, whether it's a stash of figs, a lucky hair ribbon, or the real story behind how the landlord's pig ended up in your garden last spring. You talk, and they listen, sometimes. More often, they roll their eyes or claim they already know better. You let them grumble, but you know the lessons are sticking. You hear your own voice echo back to you in their laughter, their muttered prayers to the household gods, and their not-so-subtle warnings to each other to never trust a rooster. Seriously. Remember last year? Beyond the practical, you pass on wisdom about hope and resilience. You teach them to find joy on feast days, to laugh even when dinner burns, and to take pride in small victories, like mending a sandal so well that even the goat can't destroy it in one day. You remind them that friendship with the village women is as important as any tool in the house, and that helping each other is the only way to survive the relentless grind. As the sun sets and the work is finally done, you gather your daughters around the dying fire and let them dream out loud about the future. Maybe they'll marry a baker or own a house with a roof that only leaks a little. Maybe they'll invent something so clever that no one has to carry water from the well ever again. You smile at their dreams, remembering your own, and tuck another lesson into the conversation. The future is built one hard-won, hope-filled day at a time. You know that someday your daughters will thank you, not for keeping their tunics patched or their bread hidden, but for showing them how to find joy, pride, and laughter even on the hardest days. That's the real gift, and if they someday invent running water, well, you'll take the credit for that too. The only thing scarier than a thunderstorm in the night? The tax collector's sudden visit. You're mid-soup when a sour-faced man arrives with a wax tablet, a companion holding a very large stick, and a talent for spotting hidden grain. There is no appealing your case. You smile, nod, and mentally subtract another meal from your winter plans. For Roman peasant women, the word taxes is a source of dread that sits in your chest like a cold stone. The day begins like any other. Maybe you've just patched a tunic or are preparing to wrangle the goat away from the washing. Then you hear it, a sharp knock on the door, and everything changes. You know instantly it's not a neighbor. Because neighbors don't knock, they yell. Only two sorts of visitors knock: the priest, bearing bad news, and the tax collector, bearing worse. You open the door and are greeted by the sight of a Roman official dressed just a little too well for a dirt road, flanked by an assistant whose main job appears to be looking menacing and picking his teeth with your fence. The tax collector enters as if he owns the place, which, in a way, he does. His eyes scan the room with the intensity of a hawk. He knows every trick in the book, and you can be sure your hidden jar of beans is already on his mental checklist. The questions begin, delivered in the sing-song drone of someone who's recited them 100 times before. Any extra chickens this year? What about that pig I heard squealing last month? Did your wheat harvest come in better than expected? The wax tablet records every answer, every stammer, every attempt to play dumb. You do your best to appear both honest and completely impoverished, a delicate balance, and one you practice all year long. Meanwhile, the children have developed a sudden fascination with the family's best cup, which happens to be holding the last handful of beans meant for tonight's stew. The taxman notices. He always notices. He makes a note. You start mentally adjusting your winter food plan, subtracting beans, maybe even a pair of shoes, just in case the tally doesn't add up in your favor. The process is never quick. The collector checks your grain stores, pokes through the straw mattress, and, if he's particularly ambitious, interrogates the goat about her recent whereabouts. The companion circles, tapping his stick, just to remind you who's really in charge. Every so often, you see your neighbors peeking out their doors, offering the universal look of sympathy mixed with relief. Thank Jupiter it's you, not me. There's no arguing. You can't appeal to a higher authority, unless you count the gods, and they're notoriously uninterested in fiscal policy. You smile, answer the questions, and try to avoid mentioning the 2 eggs you managed to trade for a scrap of cheese last week. The taxman eventually decides your poverty is just credible enough and leaves with his companion and a sack of your hard-won grain, muttering about quotas and how you're lucky he's not feeling stricter. After they go, you let out the breath you didn't realize you were holding. There's no time for tears, just a quiet recalculation of everything. How many meals you'll have to stretch, how many coins you can spare for shoes, and which corners you can cut in case they come back for a surprise inspection. The children return to playing, the goat resumes chewing on the washing, and you gather your courage for the rest of the day. The neighbors, once it's safe, trickle over to compare notes and share horror stories. Everyone's been through it. Everyone has lost something to the tax collector. Food, money, a treasured bowl, sometimes even their patience. But life goes on. You adapt, you stretch what you have, and you find a way to keep moving forward. Because if Roman peasant women are good at anything, it's making do with less, again and again, year after year. The tax collector might take his share, but he'll never take your stubbornness, your humor, or your quiet determination to survive another Roman winter. If your digestive system could speak, it would file an official complaint. Lunch is yesterday's bread, some cheese if you're lucky, and dried olives if you haven't traded them for soap. Meat is rare, fish is a gamble, and everything tastes faintly of yesterday's smoke. But hey, at least the local wine numbs the pain and the memories. Food, for the Roman peasant woman, is a daily negotiation between hunger and what's actually edible. Your meals are not built around choice, but necessity, and your recipe book is mostly just a list of desperate substitutions. Dinner becomes a guessing game. What can I cook with 3 beans, an onion, and whatever the chicken's left behind? If you're lucky, the answer is barely enough. If not, well, hope you like thin soup. Let's start with bread. Bread is the backbone of the Roman diet, the foundation, the constant, the please don't break a tooth on this crust main event. But even bread is unreliable. Sometimes it's barley, sometimes millet, sometimes a little of both, always with a generous dusting of ash and a stray pebble or two for extra crunch. You soak the stale bits in broth, pretending it's a delicacy, but really it's just easier on the teeth. Vegetables are next. Roman fields produce an endless rotation of beans, cabbage, leeks, onions, and more turnips than any sane person would ever want. If you're really desperate, you'll find yourself nibbling wild greens or whatever looks least poisonous growing by the road. Tomatoes, potatoes, and peppers won't arrive for another millennium, so your only spice is what you can grow, scavenge, or wheedle out of a travelling peddler. Dried herbs and garlic are the closest you get to flavour, unless, of course, you count the accidental beetle in the stew. Meat? That's a rare festival treat, usually reserved for Saturnalia, or if someone's pig finally loses a battle with the well. Chickens are too valuable for their eggs, and goats are mostly for milk. So if there's meat, you know someone's celebrating, or commiserating after a run-in with the tax collector. More often you scrape together a bit of salted pork or a bony fish that smells of yesterday's market. Fish is always a risk. Fresh if you're lucky, suspicious if you're not, and destined to haunt your dreams and your stomach. Either way. Cheese is your reliable friend, though not always your favourite one. The sharp, crumbly rounds last for weeks if you keep them away from the mice, and every meal is improved by a little crumble over the top, even if it's mostly there to cover the taste of everything else. On especially good days, you find a handful of dried figs, a few wrinkled dates, or, miracle of miracles, a drizzle of honey. You eat what you can, when you can, and always with the knowledge that tomorrow's meal depends on today's luck, at the market or in the fields. Hunger is a constant companion, never so far away that you forget its bite. There are days when the kids finish the last of the bread, and you pretend you were never hungry anyway, smiling as you scrape the pot for crumbs and quietly add, "Find more barley to tomorrow's endless list." The smoke from the hearth seeps into every meal, infusing even fresh food with the flavour of desperation. You don't mind, much. It's better than the taste of mildew from last year's flour, or the bitter tang of beans that refuse to cook. If all else fails, you turn to the local wine. It's tart, rough, and often more water than grape, but it helps dull both the flavour and the memory of meals past. Besides, it makes everyone's stories funnier and your own cooking seem, briefly, like a minor miracle. So, you laugh, eat, and live with the grumbling protest of your stomach, knowing that tomorrow's meal will probably look and taste exactly the same. Survival, after all, is the greatest recipe of all, and you're an expert at making something out of nothing. If only your stomach could learn to appreciate your creativity. So, here you are, finally reaching the end of a day as a Roman peasant woman. If you've made it this far, give yourself a round of applause, or at least a gentle sigh of relief. Because let's be honest, surviving just one day of ancient chores, lice battles, public baths, bread negotiations, and the existential terror of tax collectors is nothing short of heroic. Tonight, as you drift off in your own clean, soft bed, with a thermostat, running water, and a bathroom that isn't a public spectacle, maybe take a second to marvel at the resilience of the women who came before us. They faced endless chores, unending noise, impossible expectations, and still managed to laugh, gossip, and invent new ways to hide good bread from the children. Their lives were hard, often thankless, and frequently absurd. But somehow, they found meaning, connection, and even moments of joy amid the mud, the madness, and the mayhem. Because history isn't just a story of emperors and battles. It's the story of ordinary people, stubbornly carrying on, making soup out of nothing, and teaching their daughters to do the same. So tonight, as you wrap yourself in your favorite blanket, maybe send a quiet thank you to those forgotten women who survived on hope, humor, and a frankly terrifying amount of barley stew. And as you close your eyes, remember, history may be gross and terrifying, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, resourceful, and just a little bit ridiculous. Sleep well, dream strange, and wake up grateful for the wonders of hot water, clean sheets, and a world where the worst thing in your bed is just the occasional crumb. Good night.